So today we're going to talk about my preferred buffs and nerfs to all of the Valorant agents. Now, of course, you won't agree with probably most of them, to be honest, but this is how we're going to do it. We're going to put these agents somewhere on this list, and you're just going to probably disagree with most of what I say. So let's dive in. First agent is Astra, and I think Astra is fine. Next up, we've got Breach, and again, I think Breach is absolutely fine and should stay where he is. But next up, we have Brim, who's the first one I'm going to put in the buff category. So for Brim, the change that I would like to see is to the stim beacon. Of course, we used to have Brim with 2 stim beacons. They changed that, but I think this needs to be changed in some way. And there's a ton of different ways you could do it, and I honestly don't care which. You could give him the second one back if you want to. You could have it so that the stim beacon, instead of throwing it down, Brim basically becomes the stim beacon, right? It comes off his back instead. And so wherever Brim is, he has the stim, and people around him have the stim, right? I think that's a decent idea. You could have it so that it regenerates health. You could have it so that it does basically anything you want, regains ammo for the team, literally anything. I don't care, just some kind of small extra thing that the stim beacon can do, I think would be a good idea. Okay, next up, Chamber, who I also think, especially with the Cypher buffs we recently got, probably at this point needs a buff to be in line with the other Sentinels. And for Chamber, I know that a lot of people like to suggest giving him 2 trips. Personally, I kind of hate that idea. I don't think it would be a good change for the Sentinel class as a whole. For me, personally, what I would prefer to see to start off with is changing the Headhunter back to 100 cost per bullet. Now, if you think that that wouldn't be enough, which maybe it wouldn't be, you know, to get Chamber in line with the other Sentinels, is then you could start looking at his ult, right, and start changing that back to some of the old ways that it used to be as well. I wouldn't mind that either. Okay, next up we have Cypher, who right now, obviously, he recently got pretty significant buff, so I'd put him in the watch list. I'm not 100% sure he needs a nerf, but definitely on the watch list for now. For Deadlock, obviously you could give Deadlock massive buffs, but I'm actually going to say that Deadlock needs a rework. And for me, and this is going to be a pretty significant change, I legitimately think that they could make Sage and Deadlock a different class of agent. I really do think that that should be on the cards for the dev team to really do, because I think that they're different enough already that they kind of are a different class to the other Sentinels. But I think that then you could change the rules. And what I would like to see for Deadlock is, obviously, she has a big problem that, you know, she's one of the only agents that doesn't have a regenerative ability, right, whenever she uses something. I personally would like to see, and I'm going to suggest this for Sage as well, that the Gravnet become Deadlock's signature, right? And that she gets one back after whatever, 45, 50 seconds, whatever you want it to be. And you could do this, right? If you just made Sage and Deadlock a different class of agent, having that be the signature, I think would make sense. And then you get one of these barriers as well to use. I think that that would just make the agent make more sense in general. Obviously, alongside with that, I still think the sonic sensors need a buff as well in terms of, you know, how quickly they go off and stuff like that, and making sure that that stun does go off on people. So those are the kind of things that I'd be looking for Deadlock. Okay, next up we got Gecko, who for now, obviously with the recent buffs, I'm going to put in fine. Same for Harbor, same for Fade as well. I think all these agents are fine. And then we get to Jett, and some of you may disagree with this, but I'm going to put Jett in the nerf category. Now, the reason that some of you may disagree with this is because obviously Jett has been so good for so long that it's just become normalized, right? Everyone is just used to Jett being incredibly, incredibly good, right? We all know that. But I don't see why that should actually be the case. And what I would do personally with Jett is change the way she can dash, because I think that that is the problem and always has been the problem with Jett. And again, if you want to change other things about Jett, give her a second updraft, give her, you know, better cloud bursts like she used to have, make the ult cost less, make it so that the right clicks regenerate them, whatever, don't care, literally don't care. Just change the dash so that she can only dash forward. That would be my suggestion for Jett. So there's no more, you know, defense side Jetts, you know, doing this or whatever, getting out of those situations. A Jett instead would have to, you know, be in this kind of situation, fully turn around and then get away. There are still, you know, chances that you would have to do that. There are some certain instances where you would be able to get away, but it wouldn't be automatic. It would be a significant nerf. Obviously on the attack side, dashing in, it wouldn't really change that much because obviously you go in forward. Right, so it's not going to change that at all, but on the defense side, you just take away that super, super strong ability that Jett has always had, you know, and you really tone it down. And as I said, if you want to give Jett the second updraft again, go for it. Don't care, right? You want to make the ult better. You want to make the cloud burst better. I honestly don't care, because the main problem Jett has always had is being able to do this. Okay, next up we got KO, who I'm going to put in the fine list. Now, Killjoy, this one's going to be a bit controversial. I could see this happening already. I would actually put Killjoy in the watch list. And the reason for that is because right now, I feel like both Cypher and Killjoy are pretty good. But as long as they're both kind of together, and then, you know, we agree like, oh, we should buff Chamber as well, right? I think it's fine if these are quite good, but not necessarily much better than the other, right? And then you buff Chamber. I think that that would be fine. If you wanted to nerf Cypher, then you must nerf Killjoy, and maybe the other way around as well, right? Because otherwise the other one would be too strong. But for now, I'd put them in the watch list. Next up for Neon, we're going to put her in the buff category. And again, I think you start small with these buffs wherever you can, you know, feel to do that. And what I would do is give Neon the damage back from the wall, but just make it affect opponents. I don't really get why that can't be the case. You know, and if you need to change other abilities like Phoenix as well, then sure, that's fine. There's another buff for Phoenix if you want to do that as well, so that it only affects enemies and you take the damage, right? I think that that would be absolutely fine. And even if the damage is, you know, not that much, you don't have to have it be, you know, you take a ton of damage from this wall. It can just be a tiny amount. But even psychologically, I think that makes an effect of when people, you know, take damage. Because now that you don't, I feel like people are much more willing to, you know, just swing through this wall. But even if they just took, you know, minimal damage, you know, it just psychologically, they wouldn't be as willing to peek through the wall. Okay, next up, Omen. I'm going to put Omen in the fine category, although I definitely could see, you know, some argument for maybe putting him in the watch list or whatever. But personally, I think Omen isn't super strong. Personally, I think he's just kind of fun and good. And Phoenix, I'm going to put in the buff. So for Phoenix, I obviously talked about, you know, how maybe you want to change the wall to be similar to how Neon's would work, but also I'd like to see the healing be a bit better, right? I don't see why. Again, it seems like a pretty simple, you know, buff to potentially give Phoenix. Just have the healing from, you know, both the wall and the Molly just be a bit more. Okay, next up, Raze, and similar to Jett, we're going to put her in the nerf category. Because, again, the problem for me with Raze, similar to Jett, is just how multifaceted the ability that allows them to move is, right? Moving in through a choke point is already an incredibly strong ability, like the dash or the satchels. That in its own is super strong. But then the fact that, you know, with the dash you can get away on defense, and you know, to a lesser extent can do it with, you know, Raze as well, in certain situations. But also, you know, you can get people off the spike by throwing these things. You can throw off people's crosshairs. You can, you know, do all these extra stuff with it. You can boost up your teammates, right? I would just have it so that the satchels only affect Raze. You know, they only move Raze. Anyone else, when they get hit by a satchel, doesn't get moved by it. Because again, the satchel's already, this is already a strong ability, right? Just doing what I just did there. That's already pretty good. So why do we need to have all these extra other things that the satchels can do as well when you've already got a super strong ability just from entering in at the site? You've got a super strong signature as well in the nade. I don't see a reason why that has to be the case. Okay, next up, we have Raina, and I'm going to put Raina in the rework. I think that Raina, personally, is bad for the game. I think that the game without Raina would legitimately be a better game. So I'm not going to suggest what exactly to do, because to me, it would be kind of a full, complete rework of Raina, because I just don't think she fits the ethos of the game of being a team-based shooter. For Sage as well, we're going to put her into the rework category. And for Sage, similar to Deadlock, as I was saying before, I think you could make them a different class. And again, I think you could make the slow orb be the signature that you get back after a certain amount of time, right? You just make them a different class, and this becomes the signature instead of the heal. And that would make Sage make a lot more sense, right? I don't think it would necessarily make her, you know, much better in ranked or lower ranks, right? Where you have to maybe be a bit worried about Sage becoming too strong. But I think at the higher levels of the game, it would just make Sage a viable option to actually pick, right? So I don't think I'm causing any problems by suggesting this kind of stuff, but I think I'm fixing Sage's main problem that essentially at the highest levels of the game, she might as well not exist. Okay, next up, Skye, and Skye obviously is going to go in the nerf. And this one I think is very, very simple. Just nerf the dog. Just nerf the distance it goes. And I know they nerfed it recently so that, you know, you can only dive straight with it. But either give it more near sight like it used to have, or just, as I say, just make it shorter in terms of the length and distance it can go. Because, you know, with the nerf to the Sova drone and the Fade Prowlers before, it basically just meant that Skye has by far the best drone in the game. And it just goes too far. Okay, Sova we're going to put in the fine category, and Viper, of course, we are going to put in the nerf category. So for Viper, what I would suggest, and I think Viper is a pretty hard agent to nerf in general to actually bring her down to the level she needs to be, but what I would suggest is making the poison orb here basically a throwable smoke. Make it separate from the wall, separate from the fuel and stuff like that. Imagine this Viper orb was like a harbor cove, right? Where you throw it down and it just blooms up, and it's a smoke that you get for, I don't know, 15 seconds, whatever it would be, right? And that's it. That's your use of the poison orb. Congratulations, you have used it, right? And that would be it. And you can't, you know, put it back down. You can't pick it back up or anything like that, right? It's just, that's it. You used it. And, you know, you rework the fuel so that it's, you know, only used with the wall, and you work on the timings of how that would work and whatever. That's fine. But the poison orb would just be a throwable bit of utility that you can use once in a round, and that is it. And then finally, Yoru, and this might surprise some of you, but I'm actually going to put Yoru in the fine category. The reason that I'm going to do this is because if you did nerf Jett and Raze in the way that I suggest, I think that that would open up some space for Yoru to then start to see some play. And we've already started to see a bit more Yoru in general, you know, more recently. So I think, you know, if these nerfs did happen, then I'd be happy and willing to see, you know, where would Yoru shake out in it all as, you know, a movement duelist. So those were just some of my suggestions. Again, you're not going to agree with a decent amount of what I've just said, and that's absolutely fine. Particularly if you're just talking about specifics and whatnot. But of course, it's always interesting to do, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are down below in the comment section.